traditional knowledge. The protection of traditional knowledge. This became very, very important for us because whatever was written on our Vedas and our Shastras were being used by our parents and our ancestors from age lot. I mean, the use of certain things we just didn't realize it was so important, right? So putting turmeric on a cut. I mean, I think any sentient human being will know this. And a 3-year-old kid will know that whenever I have a cut, my mother puts turmeric on my hand. So we knew that. And when did we all rise up? When our Indians started moving out of India and started filing patent applications. Way back then, some countries were very particular that if it is not known outside the country, then it's okay, we can file in this country. If it is not used in this country, then we can have a patent application in this country. That is how turmeric, neem, basmati rice, all of them started getting patented outside, particularly in the United States. And then we all woke up to the feeling that, okay, now it's time for us to protect our traditional knowledge. That is where this whole act and rules came up from. So traditional knowledge is not a patentable subject matter in India. If I can prove that it is traditional knowledge, again, it has to have some written proof. Word of mouth proof is not enough. Say photographs, or where I've used, I have a photograph with a date which shows that haldi is being used for protecting. All those aspects can be used against a case law to win a case, right, against a patent application which has been filed. And we have done that. So evolutionary know-how of a community, such as agricultural, medical. So this is the biggest one. Nobody goes going to go and patent handicrafts, handlooms, or tradition-based innovations. Primarily, they go and patent agricultural, medical, biodiversity-related knowledge. Yoga patents are being filed now. And you have half the movies when you're talking about chakras, where we Indians ourselves are not into so much of that. You see patents filed for that as well. So rationale for protection for traditional knowledge, equity considerations, fair compensation to the holder when use leads to commercial gain, respect, preservation, and natural development of traditional practices and culture, need to raise the profile and standing of the holders, prevention of misappropriation, need to prevent biopiracy, promotion of use of traditional medicine. So why we have to protect? So the idea is it is Indian knowledge. I'm just giving India as an example. So it could be most of Asia and Africa have a lot of traditional knowledge that in this aspect we are more grounded in the use of the herbs from the backyard than many other species. I'm not saying they don't, but we tend to do that more, right? So we have more information on how each plant and especially Kerala, the heaven on earth as it is called. I think there is no Keralite who will not know what is used for a cough, what is used for stomach upset, what is used for a cut. They are really, and then leave Kerala, then you go to north of India. There are a lot of, especially those people have developed their herbs and everything where they have that lot of them growing, right? So you have kesar, you have different elements, different spices for what they are used. Everything has a why will I use a particular spice in a particular cooking just to prevent the gas formation in the which comes out of that cooking. So that itself is nothing but traditional knowledge that somebody can try to patent as a digestive relaxant or something like that, right? So that is why traditional knowledge protection becomes very important for us. So we have lot of tradition which is not even catalogued. So the major issues, because no catalog, there is no access, prior informed consent is not taken, benefit sharing is not done. So for example, somebody comes and stays in the forest in Africa and then realizes that a particular route they are using makes fever disappear in 10 minutes. I'm just giving an example. So then they come, they pick up the root, they come and bring it back, and then they can file the root under a patent application as a newly found species of plant. But that is not what is allowed. Hence, they have stopped allowing these kind of applications. Somebody who will take that root now, analyze it, extract a part of that root which is giving this medicinal property. Again, the extract also in some countries they were allowing to patent, but even that is under question. But the process of extraction may still be worthy of a patent, but it has not much value. What is the use of process of extraction if what you extracted you cannot market, right? So benefit sharing is something which they really want to see where that particular indigenous community is giving the consent, and then this particular inventor is bringing this product into the market and sharing the inventiveness and the uh, commercial benefit that is getting with that particular community. Then it is allowed, otherwise it is not. Mandatory disclosure of source of origin in IPR applications. So that has become very important. Any bio application that you file, the biotech applications, source of origin, if you don't file, the application is considered invalid. So within 6 months of filing, you have to file the source of application, especially if that source is not easily available or it has been genetically modified. Then you have to provide that source in the biolibrary and the TK library, traditional knowledge library. So again, lot of conventions and lot of agreements have what come up with the traditional knowledge laws. So Convention on Biological Diversity, FAO agreement, and the Nagoya Protocol. And this is not something which stops. It's a never-ending story, which has created the different rules and regulations that we follow today for traditional knowledge. So Article 8J requires countries to respect and protect indigenous and local community knowledge, ensure prior informed consent for using the community knowledge, ensure equitable benefit sharing arising from such use. That is why the article itself is talking about it. The Nagoya Protocol, it's on access and benefit sharing. It adopted on 29 October 2010 in Nagoya, Aichi Province, Japan. It will enter into force 90 days after the 50th instrument of ratification. So this is that means 90 days after some particular aspect has been taken care of. It is a supplementary agreement to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which we just saw. Its objective is the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. So effectively, they all kind of, guided the community to do the same thing. So the international